In the 6th year of harboring secret feelings for Ethan, our relationship remained strictly platonic. When I fell ill and required hospitalization, Ethan was the one who stepped up the most, offering both financial support and emotional comfort. When my cousin announced her engagement, Ethan accompanied me to the celebration and presented the most lavish gift of the evening. Everyone assumed that we would eventually become a couple. Summoning all my bravery, I finally decided to reveal my feelings to him. However, Ethan merely gave me a passing look and, toying with his lighter, let out a gentle chuckle. "I see you as a friend, and you're interested in dating me? Jessica, please don't make a joke out of this. Take care." I remained silent for a while before simply nodding in acknowledgement. Following that day, our communication ceased for an extended period. 2 months later, Ethan reached out with a casual message, asking what I had been up to and noting that we hadn't seen each other in a while. Looking at him, seemingly detached and indifferent, I responded honestly, "Oh, I've been going on blind dates." Immediately after I finished, I heard the sound of a phone being violently thrown on his end. I never anticipated finding myself in the situation with Ethan. He leaned against the balcony railing, his eyebrows slightly raised, a lazy expression on his face, and a small smirk playing at the edges of his mouth, as if he'd heard a joke. He inquired, "So, what is it about me that you like?" My palms began to sweat. "You're kind to me, kinder than anyone else." Over these 6 years, he had never overlooked a single detail in my life. On my birthday, he took care of everything, baked the cake himself, reserved the largest venue, and surrounded me with friends. Lightly lighting the candles, he encouraged, "Come on, make a wish." Whatever others couldn't do, he was willing to do for me. He owned a villa with an expansive garden filled with roses, all because I adored them. Although he didn't reside there permanently, he purchased the property when I first graduated. Overwhelmed by work, being new, and constantly feeling defeated and exhausted, I once shed a tear in front of him. Shortly after, he moved in and even allocated a room for me. He sighed and said, "If you ever feel wronged, come here. I'm so close to you. Who else would you turn to?" When I was too busy to eat, this young heir learned to cook and brought me meals to my office daily. His first dish was my favorite. Despite being born into a wealthy family, Ethan never acted arrogantly. The number of people pursuing him could circle around Metro City twice. When someone learned about me, they requested I arrange a dinner with him. Being young and unsure how to decline, I assisted a girl in setting up a dinner with Ethan. Later that night, I received a call from her saying, "He seems gentle, but inside, he's really indifferent. I guess I don't stand a chance." She mentioned that Ethan was the most well-mannered man she had ever met. Upon discovering she had deceived him, he didn't react with anger. Instead, he patiently finished the meal with her and then stated, "Lily's career is just beginning, and she needs to divide her time between two things. If you're not genuinely concerned about her, then neither am I. So if you don't have anything important, don't bother her. Don't you agree?" At that time, everything appeared perfect, resembling the best of times. Everyone believed that, given our closeness, we would eventually become a couple. I shared the same belief. However, I never foresaw the possibility that he might not have feelings for me. "What would I do then?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, and after a prolonged pause, he finally looked down and addressed me earnestly. "Jessica, you're 25 now. How many people have you met? Eventually, there will be someone who treats you better than I do." I was paralyzed, already anticipating his response. My throat tightened slightly, feeling as though I had ruined everything. It wasn't that I hadn't witnessed him reject others before. Girls with stunning faces, shedding tears in front of him, discarding their pride, professing their affection for him. Yet he remained unfazed. He would instinctively distance himself, remaining cold and distant. I always believed he was different with me. But now, I realized he wasn't. I had merely overanalyzed the situation. Noticing that I was on the verge of tears, he lifted his hand, seemingly intending to wipe away my tears as he had done before. However, halfway through, he appeared to recall something and lowered his hand, picking up his lighter instead and pressing it irritably. Desperation welled up within me. "But all these years, besides me, you haven't had any other girls around you. Can't we at least try? I really like you, Ethan." I rambled on, but his expression grew colder. Suddenly, I felt embarrassed. After all these years, I knew better than anyone what that expression on his face signified. He was losing patience with me. The next moment, he chuckled softly, seemingly disinterested, almost as if he were closing the matter for good. I consider you a friend and you want to date me? Do you think that's appropriate, Jessica? Stop joking around and listen. I remained silent for a long time, understanding that between us, this was the end. We wouldn't even remain friends. But I questioned myself. Will I ever meet someone like him again? Someone who will treat me better, who will care about everything in my life? I covered my face and cried loudly. He sighed and lowered his gaze to me. Though he didn't say anything, it felt like he had conveyed everything. He waited for me to finish crying before assisting me up. He bent his fingers to lift me, then quickly withdrew his hand, slipping it into his pocket. He nodded toward the two large bags in the living room. These are the gifts I brought back from my business trip. You should take them with you. I glanced over. They were all luxury items from both domestic and international brands. Each one was worth several years of my salary. He had given me such items countless times before. No matter how expensive they were, they meant nothing to him. He always had an endless list of reasons to buy me things, be it a promotion, a salary increase, or simply because I wore a nice dress on a sunny day. If I didn't accept them, he would be upset. Over time, I became accustomed to his temper and reciprocated with handmade scarves, carefully selected ties, and cufflinks. When he received them, he always smiled. A friend once remarked, "The way you two are, it's just like dating. If he didn't like you, no one would believe it." But she was mistaken, and so was I. Ethan only saw me as a friend. "I don't want them," I told him. He nodded without saying much. Before leaving, I glanced back at him. He was quietly seated on the couch, his expression ambiguous, holding a cigarette between his fingers. He seemed somewhat melancholic. Reflecting on the past, I suddenly stopped in my tracks. I wanted to try again, perhaps gradually pursue him, showing him my sincerity. What if it worked? But before I could voice anything, he spoke first. "Do you still have the key to the villa on you? Return it." I had held on to that key for many years. I had never used it or lived there, but I always feared he might forget it or something might happen to him at home. So, wherever I went, I kept it with me. Only today did it finally become necessary. I don't even know how I managed to pull that key out of my bag and place it before him. All I know is that I must have lost my composure in front of him. When he took the key, he looked at me, frozen for a moment, and then spoke in a nearly cold tone, disappointment evident in his voice. "I always thought you were different from the other girls." I stood there, awkward and speechless for a moment. I couldn't argue with him. I had confidently confessed my feelings, but I had forgotten that, up until then, we were merely friends. His family background was prominent, with countless girls around him since childhood, all approaching him under the guise of friendship. Over time, he had grown weary of it. He had once publicly stated that he would never date a friend. That was why I was his only opposite-sex friend. When I discovered this, we weren't close enough to even consider romantic feelings, so I had dismissed it casually. But now, looking back, it was clear that from the very beginning, he had drawn a clear line between us. He had extended his sincere heart, treating me as a friend, believing I saw him the same way. We admired each other, but it was entirely platonic. However, he suddenly realized that wasn't the case. I was the timid one, the secret admirer, and today, I had finally confessed my true feelings. Afterward, I took a 2-day leave and went to a neighboring city for a brief getaway. During this time, Ethan didn't reach out to me again. In the past, we used to communicate several times a day. It didn't take long for me to adjust my mood and return to work. A colleague inquired about Ethan, asking, "What happened to that super handsome rich guy? He hasn't been bringing you lunch lately." Previously, he had been so open about his actions that everyone knew he was kind to me, perhaps even a bit overindulgent. I replied, "He's busy, he won't be coming anymore." Just as I finished, one of my colleagues returned upstairs with takeout, sat beside me, and teased, "Didn't you say he wasn't coming?" I just saw him downstairs. "Wasn't he looking for you?" A surge of hope filled my chest. I took out my phone, but there were no messages from him. My colleague pulled me to the window and pointed to a figure below. See, I couldn't have mistaken that. It's him, right? Go downstairs quickly. I clenched my fists, but then saw a girl approaching him from the front. I recognized her. She was Megan, the girl who had been relentlessly pursuing Ethan. Megan came from a wealthy family and had a fiery temperament to match. Somehow she discovered that I had grown close to Ethan and threatened to complicate things for me. I was furious at the time and had a confrontation with her. When Ethan arrived, he was angrier than I had ever seen him, his face dark with rage, telling Megan to leave. Then he carefully bandaged my wound and clicked his tongue, saying, "I didn't know you were so tough. Don't worry, she won't bother you again." In that moment, I truly believed that maybe, just maybe, he liked me too. If I could just break through that barrier, I could stay by his side without any reservations. Megan said something to Ethan, and as he listened, his expression gradually softened. Then he gave a slight smile. At that moment, I regretted having such sharp eyesight. Shortly after, Ethan went to open the car door. I'm not sure if it was just my imagination, but he seemed to glance in my direction for a fleeting second before his gaze quickly shifted. Megan got into the car, and it drove away. My colleague laughed awkwardly, suggesting I might have been mistaken. I insisted. No, it was definitely him, but he wasn't here for me. Soon enough, everyone at the office knew that Ethan and I had severed ties. Someone quietly asked, "Did he break up with you?" I shook my head and took a sip of coffee. No, we were never together. The person was surprised and responded in disbelief. "I thought you said before that you weren't together, but that was just to keep it private." No, from the very beginning, we had never been together. No one believed it. The young heir from a prominent family speaking gently to a girl, catering to her every need, all under the guise of friendship. But maybe even he had forgotten that he didn't treat any of his other friends this way. She pondered for a moment. "You don't know, do you? When you first joined, he actually came to the company and had a long conversation with our president in his office." I froze. I really didn't know. He had never mentioned it to me. But now that I thought about it, there were signs. At that time, a manager who had always targeted me was demoted shortly after and transferred to another department. Additionally, there were numerous projects that should have been assigned to others, but somehow ended up on my plate. I worked even harder, avoiding any situation where I might encounter Ethan. I truly never saw him again. I didn't hear his name until about 2 weeks later. I was out shopping with a friend when we passed a young man. The man was Liam, one of Ethan's friends, accompanied by a girl I didn't recognize, probably his new girlfriend. When he saw me, Liam smiled and approached. "Jessica?" I nodded and greeted him. He smiled, saying, "I just got back from a trip abroad. It's been a while. Let's have dinner tonight. I'll invite Ethan too." I responded, "No, thank you." Before I could finish, he was already dialing a number. "Ethan, let's have dinner together tonight." He accidentally put the call on speaker, and I heard a detached voice on the other end, devoid of any emotion. "Send me the address." "Sure, by the way, Jessica's right here with me. I've already informed her. You can bring her along tonight." There was a long silence before Ethan spoke again, his voice a bit hoarse and tinged with fatigue. "I have a meeting tonight. You guys go ahead." He hung up before Liam could respond. Liam stared at his phone, unsure of what to do. After a long pause, he awkwardly turned to me. "Since Ethan can't make it, maybe we'll have dinner another time." He wasn't oblivious. It was clear from that phone call that Ethan didn't want to attend because of me. The meeting was merely an excuse. I nodded and agreed, but deep down, I knew there wouldn't be a next time. After Liam left, my friend sighed. She was aware of my feelings and had encouraged me to confess in the first place. "He's avoiding you now? Just because you like him?" I nodded. My friend sighed, looking somewhat confused. "He's not giving you any chance at all. Not only does he not like you, but he's been exceptionally kind to you." "Isn't that pure madness?" I didn't know how to respond. That night, lying in bed, I pondered it for a long time, and then recalled how Ethan and I met. It was a memory from long ago, and not exactly a pleasant one. Ethan came from a good family and was incredibly handsome, surrounded by admiration the moment he entered school. He was the epitome of a golden boy. At that time, I was ordinary, invisible in the crowd. The only one who had truly been with him, who had received his affection, was my roommate Nina. Unlike me, she pursued her love boldly and passionately. From the very beginning, her intentions were clear. She directly told Ethan that she liked him. Either he would reject her, and they'd pretend they never met, or they would get together. No half measures. She didn't want to hear things like, "You're great, but let's just be friends." She wouldn't accept it. Looking back now, those words may have touched Ethan. The restaurant where she confessed to him was the one I had recommended. After they got together, Ethan treated us to a meal. That was the first time I met him. At that time, he was already someone else's boyfriend. I watched from the sidelines, indifferent. Later, they broke up, and Nina left for a while, acting on impulse. Ethan waited for her downstairs in the dorm for a long time, but never saw her. Instead, he ran into me. Once I finished explaining, he immediately got into his car, intending to head to the airport. Noticing something was off with him, I felt uneasy about just letting it go. I took a taxi and followed him. His car sped so fast that by the time I caught up, he had crashed and was unconscious. I followed the ambulance to the hospital, staying there until he completed his surgery. I tried calling Nina, but her phone was off. Later, I realized she must have changed her number. That night, I was the only one by his side. The next morning, I contacted his friends and family through the school. I never returned to the hospital after that. Eventually, he woke up and heard people mentioning me around him. Again, downstairs at the dorm, he stood tall, asking someone to bring him upstairs to find me. Thinking it was urgent, I rushed downstairs, but when he saw me, he suddenly smiled and said, "It's you." At that moment, an indescribable emotion surged within me. Before that, we had met a few times, but he had never associated my face with my name. I nodded and said, "Nina." His smile faltered. "Forget it." He meant he was done with Nina. I froze for a moment, but didn't inquire further. From then on, he started seeking me out more often, treating me like one of his own. I went from being indifferent to being moved. Eventually, I fell for him. Liking someone like him was effortless. He had only been in one serious relationship, which had been painful. Later, Nina returned a few times, trying to rekindle things with him, but he ignored her. It was as though the impulsive person who had rushed to the airport was no longer the same. Last month, I heard that Nina had gotten married, and he sent his well wishes graciously. At that point, I was certain he had moved on. More than one person told me, "With how much he cares about you and how there hasn't been any other girl around him all these years, I bet you two will end up together." Hearing that repeatedly made me genuinely believe it. Having a crush feels like standing on the edge, hesitant to take the final step. If you take a step forward, it either works out as hoped or everything falls apart. I wasn't lucky. It was the latter. After cutting ties with Ethan, Megan was probably the happiest. We had a fight. She didn't like me, and I didn't like her. As women, we could easily see through each other's little schemes. Not long after, I received a package. The sender was Megan, but the return address was Ethan's villa. I opened it to find the items he had given me that day, which I had refused. I decided to put them away, feeling a bit sad. Ethan had clearly disliked Megan as much as I had before. How had he ended up like this, getting closer to her instead of me? Shortly after, my cousin called. She didn't say much, but, as usual, mentioned Ethan. She spoke of how thoughtful he was, how he had bought health supplements for my aunt and toys for my little nephew. Years ago, when my cousin got engaged, Ethan had accompanied me. Before we went, I had mentioned that my parents had passed away and I had grown up with my aunt. Normally, he was careless, but that day he was especially considerate, noticing many things I hadn't even thought of. In the end, he presented a very expensive gift. I listened quietly. Finally, I asked, "When was that?" She replied, "A couple of days ago." But he seemed a bit off that day, acting strangely. I asked, "Why weren't you with him?" And he wouldn't answer. Taking a deep breath, I wondered, what was that supposed to mean? If he decided to distance himself from me, why was he doing all these things secretly? Did he realize that the more he acted like this, the harder it would be for me to ever forget him? This couldn't be what he wanted. I said, "If he comes again, don't let him in. I'm not in contact with him anymore." I had confessed my feelings, and he had rejected me. My cousin was taken aback and tried to comfort me for a long time. Soon after, she and my aunt discussed setting me up with a few potential matches. It was overwhelming for me, but it had almost become an obsession for my aunt. She had always believed Ethan and I would end up together, so she wasn't in a hurry. Now that she realized it wasn't happening, she developed a mouthful of canker sores within just a few days. I had no choice but to meet two of the matchmakers. The day I encountered Ethan, I had just finished meeting the second one. As I walked out of the private room, I bumped into Ethan and his friends. He was dressed in a white shirt and black pants, his face expressionless. After more than a month apart, his demeanor had grown much colder. When he saw me, he instinctively stepped forward. Then, as if remembering something, he stopped and looked away, as though he hadn't seen me. However, his friends had already noticed me. They seemed unaware of the situation between Ethan and me and invited me to join them for dinner. Liam glanced at Ethan and tried to dissuade them. "It's fine, Jessica just came out of the private room. She's probably already eaten. You guys don't need to insist." Just as he finished, someone's phone rang. They answered, exchanged a few words, and hung up. Then they told Ethan, "Megan's asking where we are. She said she's coming." Their tone was completely natural, as if this happened all the time. But I remembered that in the past, no one would ever help deliver messages for another girl. As I pondered this, I heard Ethan's voice. "Give it to her." Then, as if recalling something, he finally looked at me and said, his voice tight, "Stay, join us for a meal." I paused for a moment, then nodded. Okay. I was the last to enter. Only 2 seats were left in the private room, one next to Ethan and the other far from him. I knew that seat was reserved for me. For all these years, there had always been one seat left for me beside Ethan. Everyone was accustomed to it. I looked at Ethan, and he was looking at me, his gaze calm, devoid of any emotion, as though it didn't matter. But when I sat down, I noticed his hand resting by his side, trembling slightly. Someone asked, "Why aren't you sitting next to Ethan?" I thought for a moment and gave a casual excuse. I hadn't been mindful before, but now that he had already rejected me, I needed to understand my place. That wasn't the seat for me. Before long, Megan walked in and sat next to Ethan. I watched silently. I had eaten quite a bit earlier, so I wasn't hungry. Ethan didn't seem to have much of an appetite either. He must not have eaten before coming, so my presence seemed to have diminished his hunger. Sitting beside Ethan, Megan was uncharacteristically sweet. The two of them exchanged a few words intermittently. I watched for a moment before silently averting my gaze. At the end, Megan shot me a provocative glance before brushing past me. She suddenly whispered in my ear, "I heard you've been living under someone else's roof since you were little. No wonder you're so unlikable, always clinging to Ethan like that." My body stiffened instantly, and I locked eyes with her. This was something I had only ever told Ethan. Before Megan could say more, I shoved her away. At that moment, I was surprisingly calm. "Still want to fight? Bring it on." But Megan suddenly fell silent, stepping back 2 paces. Last time, she had been thoroughly defeated under my hand. I looked toward Ethan. "Ethan, come over. We need to talk." The truth is, this whole situation hadn't stirred me at all anymore. It didn't hurt me, but just then, in that split second, something clicked. He froze, turning around, still unaware of what had just happened. Megan tried to follow. "I'm talking to him. You'd better stay out of this." Ethan didn't make any move to defend her. Liam understood and stepped forward to pull Megan toward his car. Once everyone had left, I turned back to Ethan. We locked eyes for a moment. He pursed his lips and spoke first. "What do you want to say?" I stared directly into his eyes. "You like Megan, don't you? That's why you've been putting up with her being around you." Ethan furrowed his brow, then sneered. "Does it matter? At least she didn't pretend to be my friend lying to me for 6 years." His words were sharp, as if he was just venting. I suddenly felt so exhausted. His actions were all saying, "Look, Jessica, you were wrong. You made a huge mistake. You ruined the person I used to be in my heart." I said, "So what? Haven't I already distanced myself from you? What more do you want me to do?" He fell silent for a moment, then, with a hint of frustration, pressed his lips together. "You liking me is wrong. We were fine before, weren't we?" "Yeah, I want things to go back to how they were," I said, pausing for a moment before adding, "This shouldn't be hard for you, right?" I suddenly felt drained. Loving someone might just be a fleeting moment, but letting go of someone, that wasn't something so simple. For a while, I had been trying to control myself, not reaching out to him, trying to keep my heart as calm as still water. I thought, time is long. Nothing is impossible. But now, standing here, he was telling me with a forceful stance. He wanted to cut things off cleanly. He wasn't adjusting well to a life without me around, but he couldn't give me the love I desired. So, his request was simple: forget about him. Only then could he continue to be my friend with a clear conscience. Was that fair to me? I stared at him, and all the reluctance I had completely vanished. Fine, listen to me. Whatever your feelings for Megan are, whether you're truly interested in her, or whether she just happens to show up at this point and you want to use her to make me give up, that's your business. I won't ask another question. As you wished, I won't like you anymore. For the same reason as before, you've treated me well. You've considered me a friend. So I'll agree to go back to the way things were. We'll be true friends with clear boundaries. A cool breeze swept by, rustling my skirt. His brows relaxed, as if he'd finally solved some major problem, and his entire demeanor lightened. He gave a small smile, as though amused. However, there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. Some things he hadn't grasped at the time. No matter how many times he thought back on it later, he could never reclaim that moment. From that day on, Megan never appeared in front of me again. A strange balance settled between Ethan and me. He didn't make any moves to contact me, but his friends took turns inviting me out. Meals, hiking, skiing, all kinds of excuses. I turned them all down. The reason? I was busy. Which was true. I was away on a business trip, not even in Metro City. By the time I returned, it was already 4 p.m. Exhausted, I took a quick shower and went to bed. When I woke up, I received a call from my cousin. She had arranged a date for me at our usual spot. The other person was on their way. I didn't have time to refuse, so I quickly tidied up and headed out. Upon arrival, I realized my cousin had genuinely put some thought into this match. He was quite handsome, with a bit of an Ethan vibe. We chatted for a while, but then he had to step out to take a call. I sat there lost in thought when I suddenly remembered something and quickly checked my phone. It was Ethan's birthday today. I had completely forgotten. So much had been happening lately, and I hadn't prepared a gift for him. I opened WeChat and saw that he had sent me a few messages in the past half hour. It had been over 2 months since he last messaged me. Did you forget something? Haven't we made up? Why aren't you answering my calls? I hesitated for a moment, about to return his call. But just then, Ethan's call came through. His tone was a bit heavy, though he seemed to be pretending not to care as he asked, "What have you been busy with lately?" He meant, why was I always too busy to meet up whenever someone tried to arrange something for me? Even today, such an important day, you weren't answering my calls. After a pause, he spoke again. It's been a while since we saw each other. For some reason, his voice sounded a little hurt. I was about to answer when the person I was meeting walked in, their voice cold and distant. Sorry, there was a bit of a situation. Under the lights, as I looked at his face, I couldn't help but feel that this guy's features were somewhat similar to someone else's. In the past, anything related to Ethan would have made me lose focus. But now, the slight resemblance just made me shake my head nonchalantly. It's fine. I instinctively texted Ethan, I'm on a blind date. Then, after a pause, I was about to ask, where are you celebrating your birthday? But suddenly, his breathing on the other end of the line grew heavy. Before I could speak, there was a burst of static followed by the sound of something crashing into a wall. I held the phone in my hand, stunned. The person on the other end asked, "What's going on? If you have something urgent, you can leave." I said, "I'm sorry," curling my fingers. I still hadn't figured out what was happening. Had I said something wrong? Ethan rarely got angry. Why had he thrown his phone? Or had I misunderstood? Maybe the phone just slipped out of his hand. I nodded and apologized, then left the restaurant. Not long after, I received a call from work. There was an emergency, and I had to go immediately. Standing at the fork in the road, I was about to send Ethan a message to explain. I typed 2 words, but then deleted them. I told myself, forget it. What's there to explain? If I explained too much, he'd think I still had feelings for him. In the end, I called Liam. I won't be going. Can you wish Ethan a happy birthday for me? Liam hesitated for a moment as if wanting to say something, but in the end, he just nodded. Got it. In a daze, I thought I heard a familiar voice on the other end, cold, with a hint of self-mockery. Don't bother her anymore. If this had happened before, knowing I'd nearly missed Ethan's birthday, I would have rushed over without a second thought. But maybe Ethan didn't need me to be like that. What he needed was just a friend. It wasn't until much later that I found out. That day, Ethan had been looking forward to it since early morning. Everyone thought that for his birthday, I would never miss it. He personally checked everything for the party repeatedly, arranged my favorite roses, and even used the perfume I loved most. He had so much he wanted to say to me. After all, we hadn't had a proper conversation in a long time. He waited from morning until evening, and by the time the dinner was supposed to start, most of the time had passed, but his phone still didn't ring. Someone, noticing how lost he looked, joked, "Ethan, do you like Jessica? We've all noticed that you're not exactly indifferent to her." Ethan, almost absent-mindedly, repeated what was said. Me? Not indifferent to her? I like her? The person nodded. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Ethan sat there for a long while. Before finally opening the chat window, he checked every day. After some hesitation, he started typing. He wanted to say something. At that moment, he must have wanted to say something, but the words he typed were disappointingly ordinary. Then came the phone call, catching him completely off guard. It was the first time he had ever been so frustrated, but he didn't even know who he was angry with. In the next moment, he smashed his phone. It seemed he had forgotten. He had rejected me, and I would always end up with someone else. No one would just stay in one place waiting for someone. The next day, I contacted Ethan first. He answered quickly but didn't speak right away. I didn't bring up the previous day. I simply said, "I've already sent you the gift. It should be arriving soon." He paused for a moment, his voice unexpectedly hoarse. "I finally got through to you. Don't you want to wish me a happy birthday in person?" I responded, "Happy birthday." He chuckled a little, but didn't hang up, as if making small talk. He asked, "Did you make it yourself?" I was stunned. I didn't expect him to ask that. "Does it matter whether I made it?" "No," I replied. Looking back now, those gifts I had given in the past were actually a bit too intimate for friends. This time, what I gave was very appropriate. He fell silent again. After a long while, I heard the sound of a lighter from his side. He took a drag from his cigarette, his voice muffled, almost nervous. How did the blind date go last night? I remembered that face. I couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. It went pretty well. I wasn't sure if he heard clearly, but he choked on the smoke. Suddenly, he coughed. I glanced at the time. "I have something to do in a bit, so I'll cut this short." He responded hoarsely, "Okay." After that day, we continued to keep in touch as usual, but most of the time, it was him reaching out first. That day, he sent me a message. "I'm making cookies. I forgot a few steps. Can you come over and teach me?" I didn't know when it started, but our conversations became about, would you, is it okay? It felt so unfamiliar, almost disorienting. My thoughts were interrupted, and I forgot to reply to the message. When I got home, I finally remembered when I saw him standing at the door. He glanced at his phone and then looked up at me, his expression a bit weary. "You should have finished work an hour ago." "Why are you only getting back now?" I froze for a moment. I had spontaneously made plans to eat with a friend. I didn't expect Ethan to be waiting here. I was about to respond when he raised an eyebrow and asked, "Did you go meet your blind date?" I opened my mouth and simply nodded, "Yeah." He didn't laugh, just stared at me. After a while, he called my name with a serious tone. "Jessica." I looked at him in confusion, but just then, a phone call came in. I had to answer it. It was the blind date from that day. He asked if I was free to go see a movie together. I didn't expect there to be a second chance after I had left early last time. Before I could say anything, Ethan had already walked up behind me and asked, "Your blind date?" I sighed internally. How insecure is he to care about my dating progress? I thought for a moment and then answered the person on the phone. "Sure, I said a couple more things, set up a meeting for next week, and hung up. Ethan's gaze darkened. After a while, he smiled faintly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. All right, you're hard to reach these days, I said. I've been pretty busy. He scoffed lightly and didn't say anything more. He followed me inside. He rarely came over to my place. The space was small, and he was tall. Standing in the room, he seemed somewhat awkward. I had never seen him like this. It almost made me want to laugh. He looked at me, his interest clearly piqued, and he suddenly became more at ease. He wasn't as quiet as before. He tied on an apron and quickly began working with the butter. I watched from the side. There was nothing for me to do, and I felt a bit awkward, so I started talking about recent events. Every word of mine was met with a response. I looked at him and suddenly fell silent. Something felt off. These cookies? They're the ones you taught me to make. How could you forget the steps? Besides, you didn't even ask me what the next step should be. The room fell silent instantly. I heard something almost fall over. His voice was hoarse. I just remembered. Slowly, Ethan and I finally returned to our usual way of interacting, but I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination. He didn't seem happy. A couple of days later, one of his friends had a baby's first-month celebration, and I went with him. Afterwards, a few of us gathered for a meal. I hadn't planned on attending, but Ethan grabbed my wrist and said, "If you're not with me and I get drunk, I won't be able to get back." The night was dark. His tone was pitiful. He looked at me, his eyes full of unspoken words. I thought for a moment and agreed. After all, this would be the last time. He had been so kind to me in the past, so it wasn't a big deal to take care of him a little, just helping a friend. Half a month ago, I had been notified that I would be transferred to a city for work, at least for 6 months. I was leaving tomorrow. After a few drinks, the atmosphere became lively, and someone suggested playing truth or dare. Soon it was Ethan's turn. Someone asked, "Ethan, is there someone you like?" Ethan was silent for a moment. Then, after a long pause, he looked up and answered, "Yes." Everyone started making noise, glancing at me. Aside from me, they probably couldn't think of anyone else. I was a bit taken aback. Just as I was about to speak, saying, "Don't look at me, it's not me," I had just confessed to Ethan, and he rejected me without any courtesy or compassion. But before I could say anything, Ethan smiled, looked at me, and said, "All right, let's continue." I felt lucky. I hadn't lost until the very end. Right before it finished, I finally lost once. The person asking the question was Ethan. He held his cards, and everyone around was looking at us with knowing glances. He asked me, "What will you choose?" I thought for a moment. Dare? His eyebrows lifted slightly, his lips pressing together as if he were a bit nervous. Message or blind date? Tell him you can't go to the movie tomorrow because you have something else. Our gazes met. I didn't move. Ethan raised his eyes, his expression more commanding, and slowly spoke. "Is it hard?" I said. "Yes, it's hard. Actually, that night I did tell the guy the truth. I declined the movie invitation, but I didn't need to tell Ethan about it. We were just friends. There was no need to discuss these things. Saying too much might cross a line." I picked up my drink and downed it in one go. Continue. In the second half of the game, Ethan kept drinking, his face dark and frightening. It was pretty late by the time we were done. Ethan had really drunk too much. I took him back home. When we reached the villa's gate, I asked him for the keys. He patted himself down, looked at me, with the corners of his eyes reddened, and said I didn't bring them. I froze. What are we going to do now? He seemed clear-headed enough, though. "We can go to your place." My place wasn't far from here. Looking at it now, this seemed like the only viable option. I took him back to my house. He staggered beside me, constantly glancing at me. His gaze was direct. Suddenly, he asked me in a soft voice, "Jessica, I forgot to ask you before. When did you start liking me?" I didn't hesitate much. 6 years. I've liked you for 6 years. Over this time, this topic had almost become a taboo between us. Now, though, I guessed it was because he was drunk that he had finally asked. He pressed his lips together and fell silent. His whole body tensed up. Back at the house, I made him a bowl of warm miso soup. He sat on the couch, holding the bowl, took a big sip, and looked at me. It's good. I couldn't help but laugh. What's so good about this stuff? Once he finished, I squatted down, gently coaxing him, and took the bowl from his hands. Just then, the light suddenly went out. The power cut off. I was about to get up when his hand suddenly locked around my waist. I stumbled into his arms, our breaths intertwined. The alcohol was making him a bit more forceful. His lips were almost touching mine, his breath warm. He called my name over and over. Jessica. I pushed him away. All right, lie down and sleep. It's almost morning. I have an early flight. I haven't finished packing. I don't have time to waste here with you. After a while, the lights came back on. Ethan didn't look well. He struggled, trying to adjust his clothes. I bent down, wanting to help him change into something more comfortable. Before, whenever he was drunk, I would always take care of him like this. But that thought quickly faded. It didn't feel right. I turned to head to the bedroom, but then he suddenly grabbed my wrist. He gripped me tightly, his breathing more labored, and was muttering something. I couldn't quite catch it, but I vaguely heard words like regret and like. Moonlight streamed in, casting its glow on him. Suddenly, I thought, oh, this is the man I've secretly liked for 6 years. When I left, Ethan was still asleep. I called Liam. Ethan's at my place. Can you come get him? Liam reflexively asked. What about you? I glanced at the suitcase beside me. I'm going to City A. I won't be back for a while. He was silent for a moment. Does he know? Did he let you go? I was a bit confused. Why wouldn't he let me leave? Liam paused, then spoke slowly. What I mean is, even if it's for work, you don't have to go that far. Stay here. He'll make sure things work out for you. I smiled faintly. He and I are just friends. Friends don't need to do things like that for each other. After I arrived in City A, I began adjusting, looking for a place. It was busy, but I was pretty happy. In the past, Ethan would have helped me take care of all these things. Now that I was doing it on my own, I found it wasn't so bad. Ethan messaged me twice. The first time was when I had just landed. I opened my phone to find a short message from him. Leaving without saying goodbye? Jessica, you really are heartless. I didn't know how to reply, so I thought for a while and just wrote, yeah. The second time was in the middle of the night. It had been 2 weeks since I arrived. It was my birthday. He sent a long message detailing how he had cooked a whole big table of dishes that day, inviting many people over. Some couldn't handle the spice and complained, why is everything so spicy? That day, he didn't eat a single bite. At the end, he asked me, is the food there bland? Are you adjusting okay? Is anyone giving you a hard time? I read it twice. Finally, I replied, I'm used to it. No. What was he doing again? When he acted like this, I started thinking he might like me. A couple of days later, I came down with a high fever. I took a taxi alone to the hospital, got registered, and started treatment. I sat in the hospital lobby, watching people come and go. I thought back to 2 years ago when I was so busy, I didn't have time to eat and barely slept, collapsing from exhaustion. It was the same kind of scene back then. Someone stayed by my side the whole time. I just had to sit there, and he took care of everything for me. I stayed in the hospital for 8 days. He arranged for me to have a private room where I slept better than anyone. He stayed up with me for several nights, worrying and watching over me. But that version of him, he didn't like me. Amid the noise, I suddenly burst into tears. How did we end up here? It turned out that even when I thought I'd given up, there were moments when I still felt a lingering attachment. This is just who I am. I'm sensitive, insecure, and a coward. But now, I should truly face these feelings and let them go. I went to the hospital several days in a row after that. I didn't think about Ethan anymore. On the last day, as I was leaving the hospital, I saw someone hurrying toward me from a distance. He saw me and quickly walked up. I heard you were sick. How are you? Are you feeling better? I was stunned for a long time, then smiled for some reason. I'm fine now. By the way, Ethan, do you remember that question you asked me before? He furrowed his brows, his expression actually a bit nervous. What? Go ahead, you say first. I have something to tell you too, I said. All right, I'll go first then. I repeated the question he had asked me. Then, I said with certainty, "You were right. I'm only 25 this year. I haven't met many people yet. There will always be someone who will treat me better than you." By then, I wouldn't have to hide my feelings anymore, under the guise of friendship. Whispers in the night, delicate thoughts. There would always be someone who would listen.